Welcome to the podcast, Kurt. We're very excited to have you. In 30 to 60 seconds, could you describe what it is that you do?
Hey, Stephen. In 30 to 60 seconds, I come up with ideas for movies. I write scripts. I give them to representatives, to my managers and my agent, and I try to get them made. I sell them to studios or producers, option them, and try to get them made into movies with this long-term goal of having somebody sit in a theater or look at their phone or sit in their living room and watch the moving image of some silly idea that I had.
Yes, I love it. Well, we usually start off episodes with a little rapid fire, and I'm especially interested in your answers to this, given you are a screenwriter. So the first question we always ask is, what is your favorite movie or movie you've watched the most?
Okay, I have a stock answer for this.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like the greatest athlete of all time. My favorite athlete is Michael Jordan,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean he's the best athlete of all time. I just really like him.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of movies that you could say are the greatest film of all time. You know, Godfather, Godfather 2, Shawshank Redemption, you know, Popcorn, Jurassic Park. There's just The Matrix. There's a million things, you know, art films. For me, there's a movie that I always came back to that I think is a perfect movie. And it's not flashy in any way, but it's The Fugitive with Harrison Ford.
Okay.
And I was a very young child when I saw it, when it came out. And I remember being struck because I think I started watching the Academy Awards when I was like very little, because it was a big thing on TV. And I remember being struck by the fact that there's this really riveting thriller that seems like an action film that is also getting awards and stuff. Like it was like, oh, even people who are artsy think this is good, and I as a kid think this is awesome. And it's hitting everybody's checkbox.
Yeah.
And it's a film I've seen maybe 50, 60, 70 times. Because my roommate in college, we used to throw it on and then quote it to each other at random times. So that's my stock answer. I love the film, and there's many others that I could put in that list, but I like The Fugitive.
Okay, that's a good answer. One question I have for you, and this is on the fly, not a typical rapid fire question. Do you think Sinners was worth all the hype?
Okay, so my answer to that is complex and layered, because
okay, the rapid fire questions aren't going to be so
clearly,
rapid.
Is there a time limit on my answers?
No. I need to know this.
Rapid questions, meandering answers is the new name. The film that it was clearly inspired by, or one of the films was clearly inspired by, Dusk Till Dawn. Love that movie. Again, another childhood classic. And I love everybody involved. I love the creatives. I love the actors. I love the idea. I always thought like, oh, I want to make Dusk Till Dawn, you know, my version of it. And that's clearly what they were doing. And I thought it was a great sort of new take on it. And then it was a huge hit. It was critically acclaimed. I hadn't seen it yet, but my anticipation could not be higher. And this tends to be a bit of a headwind for me when I get really excited about a movie, because I get really excited about movies, like run down the middle of the highway to go see it, kind of excited. And so I went to Sinners. I love the first, you know, the movies like Dusk Till Dawn or Sinners, they're kind of two halves. One is the historical setup, or the sort of the character, in that case, period piece, sort of texture, setting up the whole premise. And then the second half is like, now we're doing a vampire genre film. And I love the first half of Sinners. I remember hearing some people who were critical of this scene where it's bringing in all these flourishes of people from different time periods playing music together. And that was like the peak of the movie for me, where I was like, I love this film. And then the vampire stuff I felt was a little bit clumsy on the back end. And it just didn't quite work for me as well as everything up to that point. And you know, and that back half of the movie needs to work really, really well for it to be, you know, for it to go on the all-time list. Now, but for me, I don't even like saying that, because the theater's packed. This is an original movie by a really interesting filmmaker who's clearly saying really interesting things that I find objectively fascinating. So the fact that I didn't have like the greatest theatrical experience viewing it, I almost don't even like to say that, because I'm such a proponent of like supporting anybody who's able to make a film at that scale and have success. I should just say I love Sinners because I loved aspects of it, and I'm so happy that it did well. And that goes for a lot of films that are, whether they're just critically successful or commercially successful. As long as I see that somebody's trying to make, because I know how hard it is, and that's, you know, a theme I think of your podcast. As long as I see somebody who achieved it and it's there and it's what they intended to do, which it clearly is, I'm like both thumbs up, and couldn't be a bigger fan of what happened. So that's my answer.
I mean, yeah, like I think it's a lot more eloquent than my answer. I'm like, yeah, I thought it was like not bad, a little overhyped personally, but yeah, I thought the end was a little messy, but I think you put a lot of more nuance to it. So that makes sense.
I rewatched Sinners for, you know, leading up to awards, the top films I kind of revisit usually before the award season, and as a WGA member, I vote on stuff as well. But I rewatched it, and I found it more compelling the second time, because there's a lot of nuanced stuff going on, like thematically in the movie. And so while the genre stuff, the vampire stuff just didn't work for me 1,000% the first time I saw it. The second time, since I was kind of already seen it and was prepared, I was actually like reading the film more, you know, on a little bit more of an intellectual level. And I was like, oh, this is really, it's not straightforward. There's a lot of things going on. He's saying a lot. There's so much historical context and you know, in religious context, and just a million things going on in the movie that are interesting. And I came to the decision after the second time viewing it that like he didn't really care that much about the vampire stuff. Like it was a glue to hold the back half of the movie together, but like the intention, it's not that it didn't work 100% for me. It's that like he wasn't trying to do that, is my conclusion, my defensive conclusion of the filmmaker.
Okay, no, I like. I mean, again, my takeaways are not so smart. It's just like the music was cool, so I did like that.
Music was cool.
Shout out to Ludwig. But okay, do you have a favorite book?
Favorite book? I'm embarrassed to say I read so little now.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think the last book I read, like the first book in my life that I can remember deeply affecting me, which is a cliche answer, but it's when they gave me Catcher in the Rye. I think it was probably grade 10 or something. And it was the first time I like felt I understood what literature was. And it gave me like more than just watching a vampire movie. I was like, oh, this is affecting me on a deeper emotional, spiritual, intellectual level. So that was the first time I can remember having a really a deep experience reading a novel. And then the probably the last one that really affected me like that was Freedom by Jonathan Franzen.
Okay,
that was many years ago, maybe 8 years ago that I read that. So
okay, those are good. I mean, normally we do a little more rapid fire, but we got sucked into Sinners, which I appreciate. So
if you ask a movie question, you're basically killing about 5 minutes of tape at least.
That's all right. Okay, let's get into it. So you are a screenwriter, but you weren't always a screenwriter. I know that you're from Edmonton. You ended up going to Georgetown, and then from there you went to London Film School. But my question is when you went to Georgetown, obviously you must have had in your head that you wanted to do something with movies. That's why you went to school afterwards for it. But when you're at Georgetown, obviously a very good university, you can do anything out of there. You can go work on Wall Street. You can go into consulting, whatever. What do you remember about that time that kept you on this path towards movies?
Well, I wasn't on a path towards movies. I loved movies. They were my number one hobby, obsession, passion. But I did not really consider that being a career trajectory in any way. It didn't really even occur to me. It was pure love. Went to Georgetown. I was pre-med, and they have a neat thing in the US, or they did at the time, where if you do really well in your first, it's actually just your first year of undergrad at that time, they flag you and they say, do you want to go early entry to medical school? You don't have to write MCATs. You can just, if you stay here and go to our medical school, you can go after your second year. And I was a good student, but I had done really well in large part, I think, because our math and science here in Alberta, I believe, was so strong, like really strong. And so even though, at an East Coast school like Georgetown in the US, the students are, from a lot of fancy private schools and stuff, I just don't think their math and science was as strong there. So I was kind of like, I was just doing stuff I'd already done before. I got really good grades, and I got that offer to go to medical school early and kind of forego all the pain and the exams and stuff. And what happened at that time as a film lover, I had to take requirements because Georgetown is liberal arts heavy. And I had to take philosophy, had to take like an English class, like a lit class, and some things that I never was very strong at. And I got a bug about the second week of the philosophy class where I realized what they were talking about. And I was just like, oh, this is what I think about most of the time, the stuff that they're talking about. And I could no longer see myself, it was like kind of a come to Jesus moment. I could no longer see myself taking this very quick, direct path to, you know, a very practical job. I now became kind of a liberal arts hippie, and I wanted to take all the liberal arts classes, and I became a philosophy major. So it was a real U-turn. It was a real left turn. I'm sure much to the horror of, you know, my parents and everybody involved, but they at least pretended to support me. And then from there, because I had this love of movies and I was now a liberal arts major and really getting into all that stuff, I started then looking at, well, is there anything I could do like in Hollywood, you know, in the creative world, the creative industries? And so I just started picking away from there. I went to a film school in the summer at USC has a, you know, prominent film school, and I got into some kind of like writing, directing. It was like a boot camp kind of where you make a short film. And so I did that one summer, and it went really well. People really responded to it. And then you get a little bit of confidence. You think, well, hey, maybe I could actually do this. This is a long answer to your question. But I realized after I graduated, and I did get a job actually at a prominent firm down in Los Angeles, that the visa stuff was just going to be too hard. Like you're either a creative or you're an assistant to a producer for 10 years. Yeah. And so that's where I think the theme, if I can pull a theme from sort of what we're talking about in this conversation, it's this kind of having one leg on one log and another leg on another log, and wanting security and a career path, but then also having this sort of undeniable sort of addiction, obsession to, you know, making creative stuff and trying to survive in that space. So I went down the creative path, and then I was like, this is too dicey, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to get sponsored doing this. So I went the straight career path again, and that's where I ended up after going to film school. I ended up going to law school and trying to be a straight-laced professional. And then it really, my journey is about taking a leap, but then like scrambling to get back on a solid land, and then taking a little bit of a further leap, and then scrambling again to get back on solid land, and doing that a few times until I ended up where I am.
And so did you ever practice as a lawyer? Because that almost seems like so opposite to like you're talking about creative. And I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to, is like if you have competency, like there's this like straight line path to like making good money, and that's usually law, finance, accounting, whatever. But then, you know, the call of the creative, I guess. So you decided to go to law school, but like when you were in law school, did you enjoy it? Did you actually go article? Like, what did that look like?
I think I enjoyed law school just because I met a lot of great friends, and some of the classes are interesting. I wouldn't say law school is, you know, a walk in the park, because obviously there's a lot of hard work involved. But I kind of got the hang of it. I enjoyed the social situation. I did, you know, well in my classes. I remember I had written my first screenplay. No, it would be my second screenplay, because I wrote one in film school. That's like what you do, and it was unfilmable. But someone, a few people had read it and thought it was good, and so they kind of introduced me to some other people. And then when I was in law school, I'd been approached by some reps, and I had started writing a film that could get made, or at least that was the goal, a more contained film. And so I was doing that in law school while doing the whole law school thing, and they were both kind of going pretty well. And in law school, you have to, and you know this being an MBA, because I think you guys do a similar thing, you do like an internship in the summer. It's important, especially your second summer. And so I had a job offer, like most of my peers, to go work in a law firm, and that's the track to then working as a lawyer after school.
And was that in Toronto?
This is in Toronto. But then I had been working on this. I had written this script that had kind of gotten attention of people, you know, some prominent people in the film industry down in Los Angeles. And there was a director on board at the time who wanted me to rewrite it and change some stuff. and it was kind of looking really promising, like it was going to go. So there again, I've got my feet on these things going in two different directions, and I just can't help myself. Like it wasn't even actually a tough decision.
So,
I wrote the screenplay. Like I rewrote the screenplay all summer, worked with the director with the idea to get that movie made. And when I told the law firm I was going to work there, I remember one of my friends at the law school who was working at that firm saying to them, like, "Oh, like, don't worry, it's going very well for Kurt." In other words, there's just like, why would he turn this down? You know, because that's what you do as a law student. You strive to get those jobs and stuff. And my good friend of mine was like, "Oh, I think it's going very well for him." And I remember telling him, like, "No, it's not. I literally should not be doing this. I mean, yeah, I'm making a little money right now and stuff, but I'm totally just swinging out of the hoop on a wing and a prayer. And I should not have, this was not a prudent decision." He was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't really understand that." Now, so, and then the movie didn't go. It didn't go then. Forget what happened, but I think the actor, they couldn't get an actor on board. So the director changed, and then it's kind of back in development, right? So that's it's sort of a, I don't want to say a swing and a miss, but it's definitely like a foul ball.
So what was your mindset, I guess? Because I think I can imagine a lot of people are like, "Oh God, what have I done?" Like I've said that a lot. Like, is that where you were at, or did you have peace with it? You're like, I took a chance, it didn't work out, whatever. Like, how did you handle it?
Well, this is a recurring thing that would come up later and has come up years after that as well. There's definitely fear, and there's definitely a bit of, "Oh God, what have I done?" But it's overwhelmed by this. If you really do love something, if you're obsessed with something like I am with stories and movies, it kind of just overrides that anxiety. So it's hard to feel too regretful, even in failure. And I think if you're not, I imagine I would be mortified. Now I shouldn't overemphasize like the choice, because obviously I'd still done well in law school, and I, as later would evidence, I could still go and get a job, but I had certainly given myself a detour that, you got to put in more effort to get back on the path, right?
Yeah.
And so, but my life was changing then anyways, because I had met the woman who's now my wife, and we were looking to move out of the big city. She was from a very small town in rural Ontario. And so that's where we moved back to Edmonton, where I grew up, because I was going to work in the family business as a financial advisor, which is a good job, a solid job. And it was a existing practice, and I could use some of my skills. And if you do well, you're compensated well. And it's not like being a lawyer where you're not working. Generally speaking, you're not working 16-hour days, 6 days a week. So thinking was, okay, I'm going to go a straight-laced path now, because I sort of whiffed a little bit, but I'm going to have a nice lifestyle, and I'm going to have a pretty good balanced life, family life, hopefully. And I should have some time to explore my hobbies, to explore my passions on the side. And of course, that doesn't really happen. Like, especially once you have kids or you get married or you buy a house, your main career generally does take over. And so years went by where I hadn't written anything new. I'd sort of just dabbled, but very much just dabbled on the side. And I was essentially a white collar professional. And people would say, "Well, how are those movies, or how's that movie that was in development going?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, it's going." But I didn't think about that stuff. And I was committed to my very solid life choices.
So, and again, I think that is also something that we see a lot too when we talk to people, is that, they're like, "All right, I'll get a normal job and I'll do this thing on the side." And it kind of makes sense, because it takes the stress off, it takes the pressure off. You're not like worried about how you're going to eat and pay the bills. But it's also insanely easy to just put everything off. And I don't even know if it's like a choice. It's just like life. Like it's very difficult to find. I don't even know.
Rather than say it's easy to put your biggest passions off, it's more very difficult to find space for them once the other things start to crowd the zone, so to speak.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I always think of is it's not even necessarily a time thing, it's an urgency thing. And when you are making good money, you've probably got, it sounds like you're recently married, you're having kids, you got lots on the go. So you're not really like lacking, anything substantial. It's just hard to find that, I guess, that urgency at the time and make it happen. So when you were working as a financial advisor, and people know you kind of write movies as kind of a thing on the side, like what was your mindset, I guess, when like you knew you weren't really like moving that side of your life forward, but you were working this good job? Were you kind of like, was it eating you alive, or did you feel fine? Like, what do you remember about that time?
I liked my job, and I think that's a big factor too, is it wasn't like painful for me. Like I enjoyed working with people. I enjoyed the investment, like learning about the investment markets. I was doing my CFA, so I was learning a lot. And there's another thing on the side that's taking up time. And so
the CFA, as someone who's done it, that takes up a lot of time as well.
Yeah, especially, I mean, when I was doing it, it was almost like they just make it a lot of work. Like that's the challenge. So I wasn't feeling discontent or malcontent, which is, I think, even more dangerous if you have a really strong passion. Is like, it's not like I was suffering or going into a job that I couldn't stand or something like that, which I feel like that would almost make it a lot easier or less difficult to find time for what your dream is, So I was cruising along or working hard, but I was not lying awake in bed at nights thinking about how I could stop doing what I was doing to write films.
Okay, so then you're working this job, and then obviously at some point you did, right now you're a full-time screenwriter. So what did that transition look like? Did you just start doing it part-time, or did you have to like quit your job and that's what made you start to do it? What was the push that got you to the place you are now?
So that movie that I had written in law school, it goes into production, and any writer knows it's exciting. Okay, this is happening. And even when it was in production, I was like, I don't want to, and I just had my first child. We had just had our first child. I didn't want to like throw away everything I'd done, and I worked hard in my career as an advisor. I didn't want to throw away everything just because I had got a movie made. I thought like, this is a really sweet bonus, and I'm just going to enjoy it. And yeah, like I can, like, hey, if I work really hard, I can even retire early and then just do that full time. And it definitely gave me more incentive to like, I should find some time to like, write the next thing and all that. So it was more on my mind, but I was not like, okay, I got to jump ship now. What happened is, as it got closer, and then when I saw the finished product, which was not perfect, but which I liked, and which really, for me, rang this tuning fork. There's a literal moment in that first movie when I was watching it for the first time where I had worked hard on a certain scene, on a certain sequence. The director, I thought, had done a really good job with the sequence. Everybody involved in the movie, the production designer, the actors, had like added something. And of course, as a writer, you see exactly what they added, or exactly where they put the camera, or exactly how they put that before that, or made this glass instead of steel, and all that stuff. And it came together for me just pitch perfect. And it's a scene which is typical of the kind of stuff I write, where it's very violent and intense, and then there's a sort of a silly gag that happens right after it, an inappropriate joke that happens right after it. And I remember writing it and thinking, does anybody even like this? Like, I think this is entertaining and fun. It's funny to me, but will anybody like this? And so I'm enjoying the sequence. I'm in the theater. I'm excited. I'm watching my first movie. It's peak COVID. It's like the peak second wave. So there's, the very few people saw the movie in theaters. I'm sitting in it with, of course, my people, and then there's maybe a dozen other people in the theater. And I can see that they're getting the reaction that was always intended. And remember, I've written this thing many years ago, and all these people have come in and added their stuff, and in my opinion, improved this scene, and it just worked for me. And that feeling was like, it was like this golfer's feeling of hitting the ball, just at least for yourself, feeling like you hit it perfect. But then it's even better because everybody else has hit their shot. You feel perfect, and it's made it even drop into the hole with a more resounding, satisfying, sound. And I knew in that exact moment watching this film, I thought to myself, oh shit, like I have to do this. And at the time I had switched positions to start at a law firm, because in my head I was thinking, hey, you know what I could do? I could pivot like into still a very practical career, but if there's a lot of production in Alberta, and if I pivot into law and I'm doing contract law and business law, which is still related in many ways to what I'm doing now, and I get involved, start working with some production companies, I could start to kind of move into more, maybe potentially more of a producer business role in the entertainment space, no matter how like fringe. and then I'd kind of I'd have a real job and be kind of closer to this thing that I'm obsessed with over here. So I started just started working in a law firm, like I think 7 or 8 years after I graduated, to article, thinking I would do that. And then the moment I had that experience watching the specific sequence in a movie, I thought, oh shit, I have to quit now. And I'm like, I think I can do this. And then I got some feedback, because that movie, it was well liked within the industry, within Hollywood. So people started reaching out to me. And I remember that Monday, I let the law firm know, okay, I have to stop because I have to go screenwrite full time. And they were interestingly very supportive. Like, I've never got so many high fives for quitting a job 3 months in my life, but they were great. And I think they seemed excited about it as I was excited about it. So I just very recklessly and illogically, and I did have, a financial cushion at that point, but not like I still have children and I still have to think long term. I just sort of set out towards the horizon, which I guess is this is where it really, the rubber hits the road with in my story with the theme of your podcast, which is I didn't have any real logical reason to do what I did at that moment, but I was overwhelmed with this sense of urgency, and this is the time, I have to do it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you, because it does sound like you, up until this point, you were trying a lot of different things. You go to, a prestigious US university, you work a bit in California, then you go to film school, then law school, then finance, then back to law. Did it ever feel like you were, I don't know, almost like there was this thing at the end of the rainbow, which was screenwriting, and it was kind of like, you were almost just searching for a way to avoid getting there?
That's a generous way. That's a generous way to frame it. I would put it like this. Like I told you, I was, pre-med, was in the early med school path.
Yeah.
Dropped it to because I really wanted to explore, the artistic stuff. Then I was, on the lawyer path, swerved off it because I wanted to do the artistic stuff. Then I was a financial advisor, which is, pretty straight-laced. It's almost like my body was revolting, trying to try every possible normal job you could have. Yes. And definitely because of an anxiety about uncertainty. I don't need to be super wealthy at all, but I need to feel like I can send my kids to school one day, and then I can afford my house and all that stuff. That fear of risk, I guess. And my body just continually trying to get me on a solid ground track. And then this other side of me continually fighting against that and then leaping off the bridge. And I've done it now, as I've described several times. But fear and uncertainty and anxiety would be the reason why I didn't just, for instance, just out of college, just say, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna try to direct commercials and just really, because I don't just want to be a writer. I want to make films. But I haven't even taken that leap yet because I have certain constraints and stuff. So fear, followed by, I guess, fleeting moments of bravery is where I got to where I am at the moment.
Well, then you talked about that moment where you walked in on the Monday after seeing that scene in your movie hit, and you just knew you had to quit. Did the fear go away at that point, or were you just you'd had enough and you're like, I gotta do this?
There wasn't any fear. I felt very clear-minded and very certain. And I did use an analogy because I obviously wanted to explain people who just hired me why I was doing this, and felt kind of bad and everything. But I think the analogy, I still think it's a good analogy, which is okay, it's a very specific thing, what I want to do. There's kind of a timeline. If you don't make waves, you can't really start doing it when you're 65. And so now I had kind of broken in, so to speak. And so strike while the iron is hot kind of pressure. And it's like the Olympics, where you might have a specific sport and you qualify for the Olympics. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to win a gold medal. You could literally go and if you're a diver, splat on the platform and break your leg or something. So, and you put all this effort into it, and you sacrifice so many things to go and be an Olympic athlete. But it's also a special thing. Very few people get to do it. And so if you tell somebody, oh, I qualified for the Olympics in my sport that I love and I have to go, like nobody really questions it. It's kind of just like, yeah, you do have to go no matter what happens. Like, and often you don't make a lot of money, right? Even if you're some of the top athletes, but everybody understands kind of what that is. It's this thing that you have to pursue to the end. A movie recently, Marty Supreme, the character goes on and comically about this, but I like understood what that filmmaker was talking about. It's sort of a nonsensical goal that you're just compelled to go after, sacrificing other things. And so kind of like going to the Olympics, if you can go and you love the sport, you have to go, even if it's going to eat 4 years and you may be poor and have a broken leg at the end of it,
Yeah, no, I love the scene in Marty Supreme when Gwyneth Paltrow is asking him about like money, like what's he getting? He says, it doesn't even enter my consciousness.
Yeah, for a brief moment, you do. I mean, certainly I have had that feeling, and then of course it does give way to anxiety later on. But it's fun when you're in the throes of just pure self-belief, and confidence.
So again, and I'm gonna dive further into this because I think this just is a period of, or a state of mind, I guess I would say, that just does prevent a lot of people. I know I always think, like, sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could just take a pill and like all I wanted to do was like be an investment banker or something like that. It's like life would be so easy. Like it's just like so straight lined, and it's just like I almost wish that. But when you're talking about this, like almost like your body was like rejecting these jobs, like did you have a tough time? Like, oh, confidence is the right word, but I get the sense, and you use the analogy of you're standing on two different logs, and it can also sort of be hard to like stay happy, stay confident, like keep believing in yourself when you're just like, why can't I just dive in one way or the other? Like, I want to just be on one log because it's painful to stand on both. Like, was that ever tough for you, or did you like feel okay with where you were and kind of going about it? I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think it's probably maybe different for me than some people who have a passion but that can't stand their jobs, because all those normal jobs that I've flirted with or done, in one case done for quite a long time, I actually liked all of them. Let me put this way: screenwriting has some components that are just, and filmmaking has components that are just an absolute pain in the ass, and then it's got amazing aspects of it as well. And all those jobs had pros and cons, but overall, like, I could have been happy, I believe, in any of those jobs, relatively happy. So for me, it's more just this thing that I love the most is over here, and I didn't find it that hard to ignore it when I was living a pleasant existence, doing what I think are solid careers with futures for the most part.
Yeah.
But it's when like my little addiction flirts with me, and I'm reminded of it, and it's too attractive to me to deny. You made a comment that you wish you could take a pill and just love investment banking. I'm genuinely jealous of people who just like climb the corporate management ladder and have good jobs at good companies and work there for 25 years. I think that looks appealing, and I wish I didn't have. I mean, I guess, yeah, I think I do. I wish I didn't have this true love in some ways, because life would be so much easier. But then I get so much joy out of it, and I get so much excitement out of it, and heartbreak out of it, and all those a wider spectrum of emotions doing it, that it is something that I guess I shouldn't say I wish it wasn't there. I'm glad that I have this love, and it can be brutal, but when it's rewarding, nothing quite beats it. In terms of work, Yeah,
no, I think we both say like it would be awesome to have, a pill and do that. If someone gave me the pill, I don't know if I could take it, because you're like, this thing, it just gives me so much joy, but it is so torturing and it sucks, but it's also awesome. So, and I do think when everything settles, like, the people who are, for whatever reason, have this thing inside of them that they kind of have to get out, like that is what makes the world, interesting and fun. So when you made the decision after that Monday where you're like, I got to do this, you said that you had a bit of a, you banked some finances, so you were in an okay spot, but you still had to like, stay on track and I guess monetize this passion. Like, what did it look like after that Monday? Like, what was the Tuesday like? Do you just like sit in your home office and write, or like do you start working for a director, or how does that work?
Well, I had reps at the time,
Yeah.
and different reps than I have now. And I also had people reaching out to me who liked the movie, and so I
Yeah.
had, and you know, and also people who would take my call or you know, answer my email who maybe wouldn't have before the movie. So I had access to you know, I had some access before too, and then more access after. Places to send my stuff, I guess, right? Potential buyers, a sales pipeline, so to speak, and it had now gotten more robust, potentially robust. But you still have to. There's still unknown. It's like, well, what if nobody likes this next thing I write? So the big urgency is, okay, I gotta like follow up with another movie quickly, and I was very excited, so I was ready to roll. And then, as you know, because we met doing your great work with Make-A-Wish Foundation, a couple weeks after, I think it was the week after, I'd gone full speed ahead with the screenwriting. My only son at the time, he had come home from school sick, which is totally normal when you're 2 years old. And then he was sick for like a while. He kept getting sick. And I remember, like, I was getting my mom to help us because she lives near us. But he was, and I kept telling people, like, my son is sick all the time. And it's crazy. And he'll take antibiotics for a week or two and he won't get better. And this went on for months and months. And he would be good for a little bit, and then he gets sick again. And people would say, like, no, that's just what happens when you have a young child in daycare. And it basically is. But my wife and I, my wife's a nurse, we were just like, I don't think it's this bad. And, you know, that would be this precursor for then what would happen, which would take over my entire life, and really test everything we're talking about in terms of taking a leap in your career and just following your passion and going out on a limb, diving in. Because my son was diagnosed with cancer that following spring, and he's in remission now. So long story, good ending, knock on wood. This is many years later, after many years of treatment, he's doing very well. But that's something where, okay, you've taken this leap. You're really going to throw yourself and be fully focused on this thing that's your passion that you want to pursue. And then life comes along with a tidal wave that just rocks all other tidal waves and takes over everything. And so I think it's obviously not a common experience. It's a very unique event. And so in terms of relating it to what the topic of our conversation and the topic of your podcast, I think it's kind of an interesting example for, you can really get rocked and fail hard or get totally thrown off your axis after there's so many risks that you can't foresee, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And some of the worst risks possible, you know, it could be a death in the family or a fatal illness, or a young child with a life-threatening illness. And you kind of have, well, actually, I don't know. You tell me what the conclusion is, but you kind of, I think, let's say that I had failed. So I failed because of that, which I'd be happy to fail because of that, as long as my son is doing well. And because it really took all my time, took all my wife's time. Now, I was able to still write screenplays albeit at a much slower rate. And those screenplays went over very well, and went over, you know, at least the screenplays even better than you know, the previous movie had. And so I was able to get new reps, and I was able to meet all these new producers. And so, although it went much slower than I would have liked in terms of what I was able to produce, the outcome actually exceeded my hopes. And had it not, and so now I'm still working, and I'm making a living, and you know, I've got several movies that are driving me nuts, are right at the cusp of going to production, but then, you know, back in development and more on the way. So hopefully, you know, it becomes a grand slam success soon. But at the current state, I've at least succeeded where I'm still doing it, and it's still going pretty well, and I'm keeping the lights on. If I had failed completely and I had to go back to, you know, another job, the question is, would you regret having taken that leap? And I don't think I would have. And I think this goes back to, it really does matter, like, what if you're just risking everything because you like the idea of being an entrepreneur, and you see people on Instagram, you know, hawking products and you think like, hey, I could have an idea for a product, and it's more of like a, hey, I should have a side hustle kind of thing. You could risk a lot and maybe regret it after. But if you're really driven by something specific, I think, or if you're like me and you have this love/obsession with a very specific thing that you really need to see through, and then when life knocks you completely on your ass or a tidal wave comes along at the worst possible time and you're not able to survive it, I think you don't feel, like we talked about before, I think you don't feel a lot of regret. Kind of like going to the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
You feel like, well, I had to go, I love speed skating, or I love figure skating. I had to go to the Olympics. The fact that it didn't work out, I don't think you're going to regret it after. If you put in 4 years of training just because you thought it'd be cool and like, you might get more girlfriends or boyfriends if you're on TV at the Olympics, and then it doesn't go well, you're going to maybe think that was a waste of 4 years, So that's my conclusion, I think. Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. Like what you're saying is essentially it has to be like, I don't know, to take this risk to dive in, and then, shit can hit the fan and go wrong. If you're doing it because you felt like you had to, and it like really was something calling to you, you can sit with it and be a little, less regret. Whereas, if you just thought it was some cool fad, you weren't really into it, you're probably going to be in that, the moment that you're talking about when you're like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, this is terrible, because all of a sudden, like, the fad and all that, like it goes away real quick.
Yeah, and it for any reason it can, right? Even just normal reasons, like you try in the business or your projects or your passion just doesn't work out for a myriad of reasons. And I'm guessing, Stephen, that like a lot of people that you talk to, and a lot of people on any podcast that are about entrepreneurship, are generally success stories, right? There's a selection bias, and it's not like you can go out and find all the people who like horribly failed and were never heard from again. So I think like it comes back to, well, we don't want to over glorify the process of jumping, or I don't want to, or over glorify the process of leaping and throwing caution to the wind and accepting all this risk. But as a producer once told me, there's this quote that always comes back in my mind, even when I'm really frustrated, like working on projects that I'm working on now, which can happen, usually always happens in the middle when you're writing a movie for me, where you think I'm bad at this and what am I doing? And, this is a total disaster, the dark night of the soul. There was a producer when I was in college who said, he wanted to hire me to, work as his assistant. And I said, you know what, I think I want to be a writer. Like, I'm really interested in filmmaking. And he's like, well, and he had a British accent. He's like, well, mate, you don't like think you want to be a writer. Like, that's a disease that you are afflicted with. He's like, so you either are or you aren't. And if you are, I feel sorry for you, because you just can't, there's nothing else you can do. You just have to, you have this disease, you have to do it. And if you can do anything else and be happy, do that. But if you really are a writer or a storyteller, or, you want to be an artist, I'm sure it applies to musicians and everybody in between, doing something like that. It just is the case, and he's like, you're going to pursue it no matter what I tell you, and no matter what the risk profile is in one way or another. So thinking about it as like a condition as opposed to a passion is a funny thing that I always come back to, but I certainly have it. And I think, there are lots of people out there who have that, and know thyself is an important thing.
Yeah. Well, no, and as you're saying that, like, I can imagine it, from people in your life. And I think I could feel it myself, where, you're pre-med at Georgetown. That's like basically guaranteed to be, a very prestigious millionaire if you stay on that path. Then, like, I know, like, U of T Law is like, that's the law school that places at all the big Bay Street firms in Toronto. You're basically guaranteed path to, if you work hard at it, a very prestigious millionaire. And it's like, you can see, like, when you phrase it as it's a disease to be a writer, it's like, yeah, like, that kind of makes sense, because I don't think any, and I hope this doesn't sound bad, but it's like no sane person is going to be like, I have to do this creative thing, when it's like, there's these other options that are what, like, people would kill for.
And the cost, the risk analysis, the cost benefit of a creative lifestyle, especially now, it's not good. Like, it's not, if you run the numbers and do the data, it's not a good return on a risk profile for return on investment. As you know, as an investment professional, you're always looking at, well, how much do you get back? Like, if it goes well, how much do you get back given the risk profile? Like, that is how you assess things. It does not even close to, like, for anybody, no matter how well it goes, it doesn't really line up with the risk and the uncertainty you take on to do it. So if you can't make it work on paper, now the creative stuff is different than, you know, just more of a pure business that you're trying to set up and see, but there's still overlap with the risk profile, right? Yeah. And one is very much whole cloth. You're just thinking up, you know, intellectual property essentially and trying to give it value. It's different than building a house, being a property developer or something. But there's a lot of overlap in terms of just, you could just work at a large firm that's established and make a solid income, as opposed to needing to own something and needing to carve something out that you feel is an expression of you, no matter what industry.
Yeah. No, and I think to your point, I remember I like thought I wanted to do stand-up comedy, and I tried it a few times, and then I realized the logistics involved of like every single night being out till 1 a.m. with like a 20% chance you actually get to go on stage. And I remember just thinking, like, I don't want this that badly. So you tap out, but it's like the people who stick with it, they have no choice. They just have to do it.
And that is such a great example. And I know a few stand-up comedians, and I've never done it myself, but I've like been around them in that world, especially in you know, New York, which is an enclave for that, and that fraternity of stand-up comics, you know, at all levels, trying to get up that ladder. And it really is like, it's an amazing petri dish of people who are obsessed with this very specific thing that is so hard. And that there's so many more people who want to do it than get to do it. And the path is struggle and suffering, essentially, and even suffering on stage, you know, as you're learning your jokes and cutting your teeth. And so it's like, that's a very potent example of what we're talking about, where if you've survived that culling process of trying to be a stand-up comedian, whether you, and I know people who did it for 15 years and never had the success they wanted. And then some people who, you know, even became famous doing it. I believe that the people who failed doing it, like, I don't think they regretted it, because they just know they had to do it, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's what I suspect.
So now that we're a few years out after, like, let's call it that fateful Monday at the law firm, and you know, it sounds like I think when people think of, you know, being a successful writer, a lot of people who are aspiring to it, they would look at, like, you got a movie made, you know, you're represented, you have all the, like, you're doing it. So how do you feel, I guess, now, like a few years after? It sounds like you talked about the pattern of your body almost like rejecting these other ideas, and now it sounds like you're in it, and it's not, you're not in that sort of like standing on two logs. How do you feel now? Like, you're talking about the comedians who don't regret it, even though they didn't become successful. And as you mentioned, you got hit with that tsunami, like right when you started with Cohen. So, but now that you've started to do it, how does it feel? And like, what, I guess, like, are there regrets? Are there anything like that? I'm just kind of curious, is like, you know, someone who started to stand on that single log and have that linear path a little bit more.
It's, the virus has not only taken hold, but it's getting worse. So I'll tell you what I mean. Have you seen the Last of Us, or played that video game, or seen that TV
Yeah.
You know, like, they get infected, and then over time they get grosser and grosser, and they become like these giant sort of pustule people. So for me, like, as I mentioned, like, I love film. I really think of myself as a filmmaker, even though at this stage and so far I've only written them. I did make some direct some short films, like I said at the very outset. But one of the reasons I think I veered towards screenwriting is I could do it from anywhere. So it wasn't as much of a commitment, right? You could do it at 2 a.m. in your dorm room or in your basement office or whatever. And so it felt like more of a dipping your toe while doing the normal stuff. And it also, there's just less, there's less risk. There's even less social risk. Like, you're just out there. The directors always take the first hit, like if it doesn't work out, right? And they obviously get more credit if it does, but you can kind of hide behind the whole process as a writer a little bit. But for me, because the end film is like what I'm obsessed with, I'm actually finding, and I'm loving the writing of the films, the screenwriting, but I need more. So for me, it's now everything I think about when whether I'm writing films or whether I'm thinking about like what I can do, especially as my son now is, knock on wood, in remission, and my other son's getting a little bit older, how I can direct a film. And that requires a lot more investment. It requires me to travel sometimes, or it will, and it requires me to learn a lot more that I don't currently know. And so I'm fully on the log, I'm fully in this, and all that's happening is the condition is getting worse, and I'm setting my sights on the entire process, not just the writing, and trying to think, 12 steps ahead. My obsession is now moved to, I don't just want to write the movie, I want to write, direct, and produce it, and then at some point, produce other people's films. And just how many movies, how many stories can I get out between now and the time that I die at some point in the future, is where my obsession has evolved to.
Yeah, I love it. So it doesn't sound like you're jumping back on that other log then.
Well, to be clear, every day and night, it occurs to me that the theatrical business is dying. Content has never been more in demand, but like the film experience is changing, which is fine. Like, it's just, people are going to watch things how they watch them. And so sometimes I think, like, is this going to become like something that, whereas it used to be 3,000 people could make a living doing it, in 2 years, maybe only 10 people can make a living doing it. Like, there's maybe like being a world-class cellist or something. Not that it was ever easy, but, or a world-class poet or something. Like, there's just fewer and fewer people are able to make a living doing it, sometimes as time goes on. So I have all those fears related to whether people are still going to be watching movies in any way that produces a profit in 10 years, or if it's just kind of like, something that's on in the background while they're buying widgets on Amazon or whatever. All those existential fears are still there, and anxieties. And I don't know, I guess those would go away if I made so many films and had so much money that I was like, okay, I've kind of scratched the itch, so that, if it all goes away tomorrow, like, I'm good. I certainly don't feel that way yet. I still got like a million things I want to do. So there's a existential fear that the entire industry, which is being upended as we speak, will be no longer a viable business in a way that I need it to be, to continue to have financial success and everything like that. So that just creates more urgency and more running towards, running down the tunnel, swimming upstream as fast as you can to try to get the things you want to get done in case. And of course, my experiences have made me a little bit more paranoid that the apocalypse can come along at any moment. A tidal wave could hit at any moment. So I certainly don't want to give the impression that I sleep like a baby every night. But again, because I love it so much, those anxieties and those existential fears are all sort of just kept at bay, to the point where I can still function.
Yeah, no, I guess, like, obviously I've heard as well about people talking about like AI writing movies and all that stuff. But what I also hear is that, like, AI is making lawyers obsolete. AI is making financial advisors. AI is making guys like me, investment analysts, obsolete. So it's like, if it's coming for us all, it's like I'd feel, it would really suck to like be like, I took the safe route and then the safe route didn't work out. I guess
that's crazy. I'll tell you a quick anecdote from somebody I know who works at one of the biggest tech companies. Is a senior manager, and had to lay off a bunch of high-level engineers at one of the biggest companies in the world because their jobs were being outsourced overseas, with AI being the main driver of that, because like coders are losing their jobs. And but these are folks who are the top of their profession, okay, who probably they probably went to MIT or some amazing tech school, and they got a job at the biggest company, and they did well, and they rose, and the top people being let go first because they have the highest salaries, they're the biggest cost.
Yeah.
I just thought to myself, like, that's just wildly, like, I feel really sorry for those people because they did everything they were supposed to do. They even did the thing of like, oh, technology is taking off. You should be coding. You should take, and I'm sure they'll be okay. Like, because they're, whoever I'm talking about is smart and will find a way to pivot. But it's just, it's another example of how you cannot plan ahead, really. Like, the ocean will decide which way it's going to send a wave or if it's going to sink your boat. And all you can do is just paddle your oars well in the direction you want to go and hope you make it to dry land.
Yes. No, because we're tossing the movie references. It makes me think of, I'm forgetting what it's called, but it's George Clooney movie where he like lays people off and he flies around.
Perfect
like,
Storm. No, wait. No, you're talking about, you're talking about Up in the Air.
Up in the air. And he has that scene with J.K. Simmons where he's just like, how much did they pay you to give up on your dreams? Because he saw on his resume that he went to culinary school.
I remember that.
Yeah. And J.K. Simmons is like, 30 grand or something. And then George Clooney says something along the lines of like, I lay people off every day who gave their life to the company and then they get laid off. So anyways, you're right that it's like you have no clue which way the ocean is going.
To put a cap on that, because I was just thinking about it as we're talking. So like AI and filmmaking, what they can do is incredible currently in terms of like effects. But as far as the storytelling component, I'm not actually worried about that. Not because I'm delusional, but I'm actually more worried that people stop paying for movies or TV or content of that kind. It just becomes, the value is sort of driven to zero because it's just a loss leader for other products.
Yeah.
So the value of doing it essentially goes to zero. Like, you can't make money doing it. It's more just a pure passion. And then in 10 years, I'm about to turn 50 and I have to go get like a white collar job, or I have to retreat to a white collar job because nobody's paying for movies or TV anymore. And the white collar jobs aren't there because of AI. So I'm actually more worried about AI, or, they're not there to the extent removing like the dry land than I am about it crashing my boat, which is a funny thing to think about. I guess, maybe the positive conclusion for whoever's listening to this is, if AI really gets to the point, which I'm sure it will at some point in the future, where it can sort of replace all jobs, creative included, hopefully we just don't have to worry about anything then, it's like, then we really will. I'll just be writing my movie stories for fun because I have a robot who does my laundry and everybody has universal income and it's solved all the world's problems. So there's a utopian look at the future for your listeners.
Yes. Yeah. No, I always think that like, I imagine this has happened a lot of times. Like, I just think about like when like Microsoft Excel was created and how much time that would save people, in finance. It's like, it wasn't like mass layoffs. They just expect you to do more work. And it's like, part of me thinks that's a lot of times where it goes. And I also, when you're talking about AI with screenwriting, like, I don't know for sure, but my hunch is that a lot of the Apple TV movies and shows use a lot of AI. And I'm like, you can tell, like, they feel like a half an hour long commercial sometimes. It's like, there's absolutely nothing to it.
It's definitely not prompts. I actually think this is a bit off topic, but the really excellent stuff that I'm seeing come across my phone that's like, this was done with AI. And I know people in the VFX industry, which of course is going to be affected by that.
Yeah.
You can't make those videos with just the prompt. They're kind of cheating and saying it was just a prompt, but there's talented VFX people using that technology, which is amazing, to improve their efficiency and their workflow, by many multiples. But the good stuff that you see it's done with like an artist behind it who's using the tool, but still has to do a whole bunch of like nitpicking and changing stuff and like painting essentially. So I think the current version, as amazing as it is totally overhyped and in some ways a bit of a scam in terms of what they're presenting. And what they do right now is to put a famous person in it, and it's amazing. Like, you could put Tom Cruise's body on, the Incredible Hulk or whatever, and then it gets 1 million clicks. So, but if we're going to have any copyright, then somebody's going to have to get paid for that, or we'll just have no copyright and nothing will matter anyway. But the actual storytelling stuff is not even close as amazing as it is. And so there you go. There's an optimistic.
Oh yeah. Like, again, I remember I watched Wolves on Apple TV with Brad Pitt and George Clooney. I remember just thinking, like, yeah, I feel like this is like an AI or something, because it just does not feel like, it feel like an Nespresso commercial that went on.
That film was very much written and directed by John Watts, a very successful filmmaker.
I'm hating on John Watts. I don't even know, but I do remember just thinking, like, yeah, there's not a lot to this, but. Anyways, I'll stop.
You're thinking they phoned it in. I haven't seen the movie, but
yeah, it did feel like an easy paycheck for. It felt like they knocked it out in like a weekend or something, and they very formulaic, I guess would be the best way to put it.
The two most handsome men on earth just sitting around looking good.
Yeah, I mean, aside from us, obviously, but the very last question that I would have is, if you had someone who was speaking to you and they had a business idea or a creative idea or whatever, what piece of advice would you give to that person if they're thinking about giving it a shot and going after it?
Creative and pure business, I think I would give a slightly different advice. Creative, which is obviously more in my wheelhouse, because I haven't started a brick and mortar business, but I am a creative professional, which is entrepreneurial, very sort of pure entrepreneurism in some ways. If creative, I would say you have to make something, I guess, what would you call it in like a developing business practice? Like, make something you can scale up. So for instance, if you want to be a screenwriter, write a 10-page short story that is visual, that is image and sound, which is different than a pure novel. And just there, you got it. And then that, for instance, is something you could publish that if you wanted to, or you could at least show it to people and be like, what do you think about this? So start small, I guess. And so start small so you can finish something. If you've never written a screenplay before, for instance, 120 pages of this kind of weird format that you're not used to, don't bite that off. You don't need to write a 10-page short film, or like I said, just a short prose story, and just kind of and then test it, market test it. In other words, just have people read it, or if you can draw, make a little graphic novel, 10 pages, like, this is a comic, what do you think? Get feedback, or don't, and then go the next step. And so starting small and then incrementally, and then just expanding. That's how you get to a full-length feature in a way that isn't as torturous. If you're the type of person who, could take you a year to write a full screenplay if you've never done it before. So something that you can finish sooner. For a hard business, that's obviously more difficult, but there's a million ways, and you would know a million different ways to like kind of market test your product or market test your idea. And then, okay, is this working? Is it not? Okay, let's iterate. Let's go from there. I think it applies to both, actually.
Yeah. So start small, start iterating, get feedback, just start moving.
And I can relate that to my own experience, because usually, in the first few things I've written, 3 to 4 months it takes me to write a screenplay. My son was going through really intensive cancer treatment, and my wife and I were all hands on deck. I think it started to take me, a year to write a screenplay, which is a long time. And even as somebody who was relatively experienced at that point, like, you kind of, like, 6 months in, especially when you got all this other stuff going on, you start to lose the thread a little bit, and you kind of, it's like you're lost at sea. You can get lost at sea taking on a long-term project, so you want to give yourself a goal or create a mini project that you can finish in 2 weeks or like a month tops, or a few days even. And then you completed it. There's that feeling of, okay, it's done. How did it go? Okay, should I expand this, or should I pivot and test something else? I think that's super useful. And as I now am getting back more into a normal life, knock on wood, I probably will even use that, even though I don't need to as much now, because I think it's just really useful.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I really enjoyed this conversation, Kurt.
You've
had extremely interesting and inspiring career and journey to get here. It's awesome to see people from Edmonton who are, impacting things on like a global scale. So I don't know about a global scale. Movies around the world. So you got King Leonidas in one of your screenplays. So that's pretty
Gary
cool.
B, he's the
Yes.
man.
Yeah.
It's a great place to live here, and it's cool to be in a career or industry that you can do it long distance. Not everything you can, and lots of businesses you can't. So I feel lucky that I can, live where I grew up for the time being, and still stay alive in a profession that takes some place somewhere else, and also that I can chat to people like you over these emerging technologies. So thanks a lot for having me.
It's very cool. Awesome. Well, we'll stay in touch, and have a good one.
You too.
Take care. Bye.